All set? Okay, Ken, we're in Manhattan, Kansas. It's the 25th of September, 2003, and we're recording this for the Riley County Historical Society. Would you start with your full name and where you were born and when?
I'm Kenneth P. Johnson, and I was born in Winchester, Kentucky, in April of 1927.
Okay, April 16th.
April 16th, 1927.
And tell us just a little bit about your family as you were growing up and the kind of living conditions, farm or in town or...
Well, my family, I have a brother and a sister, and we grew up. We were kids during the Depression in Winchester. Of course, everybody grew up in a Depression remembers those years, then my father was a rougher and sheet metal worker, and so even as a kid, I used to go work in the shop, work with him. As World War II started, why Dad, the farmers, a lot of the farmers were very short on labor, and so my father went for, let's see, it was 1943, I believe it was. He decided to go to the farm, So we were on the farm there for a while, and it was in let's see what year, I don't recall the year, but in my sophomore year, Dad pulled me out of high school to work on the farm. And so then I was there until they drafted me into the Army in September of 45.
Okay, so you were drafted and went into the Army, and what was your first duty station then? Where did you go for training and induction and those kind of things?
I was inducted at Camp Atterbury, Indiana, and then I was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I took basic training, and then I was trained as a telephone lineman, artillery telephone lineman.
Okay.
And then after finishing my telephone lineman training, I was sent to Panama, and I was.
And this is in what year now when you finished?
I finished, and I shipped out to Panama in February of 1946.
Okay.
And I was in Panama for 9 months, and I went through pretty much 9 months of training in harbor mines, all phases of harbor mines. I mean, we actually, even the loading and the cleaning, the wiring, the planting, even the controlling of the mines. I don't know how much you want to get into that, but
well, tell us.
Well, in the training phase, these mines laid right on the ocean floor as you enter to the Panama Canal, coming into the Bay of Panama. And each of these mines held 2,000 pounds of TNT. And each of them had a magnetic coil rod, and it had I think it was about a 17-pound booster charge. And you had the cables, waterproof cables, that ran from the mine back to an underground control station. But I started out working, cleaning and loading these mines, and actually I was in a pit about the size of this room, and they'd lower this empty mine case into the pit, and you had either a wooden or a brass shovel, and you filled the case up with TNT. And I think I think those mine cases, I think that TNT must have been toxic because they would send us to the hospital once a week to monitor to see if we were getting poisoned. I mean, you know, I wasn't very educated, but I knew that they weren't sending us to the hospital for nothing, you know. And then went from that into actually working off of what they called an L-boat. And the L-boat dropped the distribution boxes. Each of these distribution boxes controlled 10 mines, a group of mines. And the mine planner would drop off the mines and then would run the cables from each mine to that distribution box. And so then you'd have a group of 10 mines, and then you'd have the distribution box controlling those 10 mines. Then you had a main cable going back to the underground casemate that controlled the entire minefield. Then out ahead of the minefield, we had what they call hydrophones. And these hydrophones we would drop into the water so that as ships or submarines came into that area, you picked up propeller beats. And there were people there who, by looking at the graph of the propeller beats, they had an idea what was coming in. Those mines could be set for automatic fire, but they were set for controlled fire because it was all friendly traffic coming in there. During World War II, I'm sure, you know, you always had friendly traffic moving there, but they wanted, so they had to move right over our minefields. They didn't want to blow up our own people. You know, but,
So you worked off a boat?
I worked some of the time. I did have some training on the mine planner, and I had some training on the L-boat, and I had quite a bit of training in, you know, the loading and the wiring of the mines, and some training in working in the casemate where we control the minefields.
You didn't work all of the time. What do you remember about Panama in the mid-40s?
Well, I think probably one of the most memorable things is right after World War II, Eisenhower toured Panama. And I was a member of an honor guard that went over to Albrook Field to meet Eisenhower when he came in. And there were 50 of us from the Army, and I think there was 50 Navy, and maybe, I'm not sure whether, I believe they had some Marines there too, but anyway, we were an honor guard for Eisenhower. And then Eisenhower did an inspection of Fort Amador, and I stood an in-ranks inspection with Eisenhower. And the one thing that was interesting, we had this one fellow there who was just he was a real chow hound, but he's a complainer, you know, always complaining about everything, you know, and complaining about how lousy the food was and all that. Well, apparently somebody must have told Eisenhower about this guy, because he stopped, and the guy was down about 4 men from me in ranks, and Eisenhower says, "How's the chow?" This guy, he says, "Fine, sir." But
you get impressions of people, famous people like General Eisenhower. What surprised you about him since you got to see him up close?
It surprised me. He is very kind of soft-spoken, low-key, not the aggressive type individual you'd think of a commander, you know. But that was one of the impressions I got. That he was just kind of, you know, kind of low-key person, calm, you know.
Anything else that you remember about Panama you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I remember my barracks was right on the bay before you go into the canal, and I remember watching the aircraft carrier, the Shangri-La, go through there, I think to go over and be blown up in the A-bomb tests in the Pacific. And I enjoyed going down to a place, there's a beach there off of one of the little islands, I think it was Naos. But I enjoyed going down the causeway to the beach. And we had USO tours around. One of the tours that I enjoyed was the old where the French were in there, and where they actually had the places where they said the French people that they condemned, they had these buildings, and then they had these bars that come down under them, and they would just put them in there and let the tide come in until they got to the top and open the gates and let them out, you know. And I mean that was kind of blood-curdling thought, but and then I took one USO tour to a place called Sharia Falls, and back in the jungle there. And, that's where I got diphtheria, and and I'm sure that's where I got the diphtheria. But apparently my shot for diphtheria hadn't taken, you know, and nobody had ever seen diphtheria, and so they diagnosed me with tonsillitis and gave me sulfa for several days, and then they sent me to a hospital, Army hospital, gave me penicillin for several days, and I didn't respond. Then they sent me to Gorgas Hospital, and there was an Army doctor there. He's an older, more mature doctor, and he had actually seen diphtheria, you know. And so he gave me one antitoxin. First he did a culture, which nobody had ever hadn't done before. He did a culture and found out it was diphtheria. And then he gave me the one antitoxin. And then while I was in the hospital there, this little Panamanian kid sharing a room with a little Panamanian kid. I think he looked like he was maybe about 3 years old. And I never did see his parents. While I was there, we were in isolation. And the kid, when he would get to crying, sometimes I would go over and I'd tickle the bottom of his foot to stop him. And the one thing that when I was released from the hospital, I'd lost weight. I wasn't heavy anyway, but I was down to not a whole lot over 100 pounds. And after the very first day of reporting back to base, I had to go on a march with the field pack and the steel helmet, and that helmet was, my neck was so weak, the helmet was wobbling, you know. But anyway, I lived through all that.
Anything else about Panama before we leave it?
Yeah, this is just kind of humorous. I was out one night on just 11 o'clock pass. I'm supposed to be back 11 o'clock. And but we ran into this boatload of it's mainly women from England, and this group told us that they were going to New Zealand to get married to these people, these guys they'd never met, you know. And so we were in this bar there, and we were just really having a good time, you know. And so it was past 11 o'clock, and the MPs come in and they checked my pass, and of course it was expired, and the MP says, I'm going to have to take him in. And this one British guy who was in the group, he jumped up from the table and he says, I say, you can't take him away. He's a jolly good chap. But they did take me away.
Took you back to post.
Well, guardhouse for, I was in the guardhouse for 2 or 3 hours, and they called the post to clear that it was okay to let me go, and they did. Yeah.
What was your next duty station then after Panama?
From Panama, then I was shipped back to Fort Bragg, where I was processed out.
Okay. And that was 19...
That would have been in December of 46.
Okay. And what was in store for you then after 1946?
Well, when I came back, as I told you, I had actually I hadn't completed my sophomore year in high school, but I worked for about a year roofing, putting on tar and gravel roof and that type of thing. I mean, probably one of the most miserable jobs in the world. And I decided, I really need more education. And we had, in our hometown there, we had Kentucky Wesleyan College was there at the time. And I went in and I talked with the dean and I asked him, is there any way that maybe I could take the GED test and get into Kentucky Wesleyan? And so, knowing that I hadn't even finished 10th grade, he almost laughed, and he says, no, he says, you're going to have to get some more high school. And I said, okay. I said, if I go back to high school for a year and then take the GED test, how about it? He says, okay. He says, I think it was worth that. So I went back to high school and under the GI Bill, and I doubled up. I actually finished pretty much 2 years in one in high school. And I took the GED test also, and then I got my diploma. And then they accepted me into Wesleyan. And so I went to Wesleyan 2 years. And then in July of 1950 was when the Korean War started. I had just finished my second year at Wesleyan. And that's when I decided that I was going to join the Air Force, and I did within a couple of weeks or so of when the war started.
And tell us about your entry into the Air Force then, and where you went to. And
well, in the Air Force, I processed in Lackland, and at Lackland in Texas. And it was just hotter than blazes, and down in San Antonio. The interviewers there saw that I'd had a couple of years college, and that quite a bit of it was in office type work. And so they asked that I want to stay and work there at Lackland. And I pleaded. I said that my records may show that I'm qualified for that work, but I certainly am not. I want to be moved anywhere except Lackland. Well, they did. They sent me to Castle, 93rd Bomb Wing in California. And again, when I went through personnel in wing headquarters, the officer there looked at my records and said, I think we could use you here, in our office here. And I said, okay, all right. So I was assigned to in the personnel office in 93rd Bomb Wing headquarters. And then most of the time there I spent in the tech school section. And I headed the tech schools section for the 93rd, and it involved, you had to know the classifications. You're probably familiar with the AFC. The Air Force still has 7-digit codes for classification. You need to really know all the different specialties and what they do, and you would bring people in and talk to them who wanted to upgrade their skills, upgrade what they're doing, and then you would interview them. Sometimes they had to take some tests and get them off to the different tech schools. And then when they would come back to the 93rd, well, then if their training warranted reassignment to other duties, you did that. One of the things that really, some things that I remember quite vividly was that we had quite a few gunners who, you know, in 1950, 51, we were moving from manual gunnery into electronic, you know, radar, so we're doing away with these manual gunners, and I shouldn't say doing away with them, but their jobs were being lost, you know, and we knew it, and we would call these people in and interview them and explain to them that, you know, we're not going to have any positions for gunners. And I mean, you'd have staff sergeants and tech sergeants, gunners, and you try to offer them to get, if they were qualified, to get into radar school or radio school or some other school for upgrading and training out of that. And even in the Air Force, you don't force people to go to school, you know, because, you know, if you force them, they won't succeed. And but most of them would take the sensible course and go ahead and retrain. A few wouldn't, and those few who wouldn't, you see them working in the kitchen. You know? And then one of the thing I remember too is SAC was involved in, you know, with the nuclear deterrent. And a part of what we had to do is train people to work in those nuclear assembly units. They had a name for those squadrons. It was, right now it slips my name, the special name for those assembly squadrons. But for me to get people to go into these schools to get skills for working in those assembly squadrons, operations was so tight-lipped with me that it was hard for me to get enough information.
Excuse me a minute here. We've lost our microphone, and I don't know how long it's been down there.
Oh, golly.
I've been listening too carefully.
Okay, I didn't see it. Yeah, okay, we may have to start this thing all over.
Well, let's
Okay.
continue on, and
Okay.
We'll check it when we're
Okay.
through and fill in
Okay.
if we have.
Right. Yeah.
Now, we were talking about Castle Air Force Base and training people in
Yeah.
nuclear weapons, and
Yeah.
the assembly, you're talking about the assembly of the weapons?
Yes, the assembly, they were called aviation field depot squadrons.
Okay.
And the operations people were so tight-mouthed about, you know, information. You needed information to know if the people were qualified to go to school. I remember one of the schools was a refrigeration school, but I needed to know a little bit about, you know, what was needed, and it was hard to get information out of. But you know, anything in that line was top secret, and they didn't want to talk with you about it.
Yeah. How long were you at Castle Air Force Base?
I was at Castle for about 2 years.
All right. So in I'm trying to think back on the dates. What year was it when you left Castle?
Let's see, I would have gone to Omaha, and it was in February. Would have been 52, I think. I believe
Okay.
it was February 52.
52, you went to Offutt Air Force Base
Mhm.
in Nebraska, and what did you do there?
At Offutt, and I thought I should just show you how things can. See, I worked for a captain in the 93rd when I was doing the tech school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this captain was he made major, and he was transferred to Offutt, and he was in charge of the programming, personnel programming for all SAC bases.
Okay.
And so he wrote me this letter, and he says, "Dear Johnson, any luck getting that S placed in front of your sergeant's rank? I do hope it has been accomplished. You can probably guess the reason for this letter. It is, however, very important to me. I am looking for a very capable young man for my section to replace someone who is permanent party material. Although I realize that you are satisfied with your present position and that California suits you, it did me also, but you're getting vulnerable for any assignment almost anywhere. You will notice that there are very few regular airmen left with any retainability. If you're interested in a change to a larger installation and city, please let me know as soon as possible. I can't guarantee anything in the way of swank housing. The airmen's apartment-style barracks are continuing to be built, and you may have a chance for one of these. There are a lot of people up here, and the competition is great. Of course, that's fun. If you're interested, I'll start the action going. It would be grand having you in my section again. The work here isn't straight classification, but is connected with assignment and manning of all SAC units. It may give you an opportunity to prepare letters on your own. I think it is a good opportunity for anyone who would like to work in this madhouse. I hope you keep all this to yourself, as I'm certain you understand. Give my regards to everyone. Best wishes, Al." And so that, in about less than a month, I was in SAC headquarters. But what happened there was he told me, actually, he says, "You in your classification, we only have one person in 15th Air Force who is still eligible for overseas assignment," and says, "We're about to levy. Headquarters USAF has asked us for a person in your classification to go to the Far East. Now, I'm about to levy a quota on 15th Air Force, and that will go to the 93rd, and that is going to be you." So, yeah.
So that was easy. You went to Omaha.
I went to Omaha. Yeah.
How long were you stationed at Offutt?
About 2 years.
All right.
Was that.
And what after Offutt? You stayed in personnel, I assume, the whole time you were there?
Yes, and SAC headquarters in Omaha, working personnel and manning all SAC units. And then while I was at Offutt, I started taking some classes at Omaha University, getting back into that again. I didn't realize, till getting ready for this project, I didn't realize that in 1953, I had taken the college-level GED test at Omaha University and passed that. I'd forgotten that I'd done it, but I did, and I know it's going up for personnel supervisor. I don't know if it was related to that. I don't remember, but that's something that came out of this. I just discovered that I'd taken that GED test in '53. But anyway, and while I was at SAC, about that time, I met my wife, Nina, and Nina had been a teacher, an elementary teacher, and when I met her, she was a secretary at Bell Telephone Company in Omaha. And and this would have been less than a year before I got out of the service, because we were married, and then I was still in the service for, let's see, not a year, I was in service about 6 months after we were married.
All right.
Then I was, of course, I had GI Bill time, and I went ahead and stayed in Omaha and finished up my degree.
And the degree in?
My degree was in education with a bachelor's degree in education with emphasis on business.
Okay. And that was the University of?
Of Omaha, and it's now the University of Nebraska at Omaha.
All right.
But it was the University of Omaha at that time.
Tell us about your family then, as you're married now.
Yes, right. Okay. Well, after graduating from University of Omaha, my first teaching assignment was in Irwin, Iowa, southwest Iowa. And well, actually, before I went to my first teaching assignment, our oldest daughter was born in Omaha.
Okay.
And then we went to Irwin, and I taught high school in Irwin for, I think, 3 years, I believe. And then while I was at Irwin, my son was born. And then when we went to, after teaching in Irwin, I went to Audubon, Iowa, and I taught there for, I think, 4 years. Then from there to the Quad Cities, where I taught for, 22 years in the high school, and about 5 years after retirement in Black Hawk College. But anyway, and now my family at the present, my oldest daughter is, she has her degree in social work, and right now she's taking some classes in Brookings, South Dakota, preparing to be a teacher, to get her teacher certification. My son is with the Army Corps of Engineers. He's a civilian engineer. He got his engineering degree at Ames, Iowa. Then the Corps, after several years, sent him to Colorado State, where he got his master's in hydrology. And he runs a section with the Army Corps of Engineers in Rock Island, Illinois. And my youngest daughter lives here in Manhattan, and she is a teacher at K-State, political science. And so she teaches mainly in the area of political philosophy.
And you retired here in Manhattan?
No, actually, I retired from high school teaching in 1983, and that's in Rock Island. And then I was an adjunct associate professor at Black Hawk College in Moline, Illinois. And I was in the office careers department there. And I had taught evening classes, and over a period of time I taught it. I was looking at my records, I'd forgotten all about it, but I had taught there part-time for almost 20 years. And then, but after I retired from first year I retired from high school teaching, I got a call from the department head at Black Hawk and asked, if I wanted to put in more hours over there. So I was teaching about half-time.
And teaching what kind of curriculum?
I was teaching everything from like introduction to business management to accounting to all kinds of office machines, and and then of course we got into the almost like on the pioneering phase of this word processing. Before word processors were very practical.
All right.
But,
Grandkids?
we have, my son has 3 boys, and the oldest one is a college student. The he has twin boys who are just finishing up high school. And then my daughter has a 6-year-old here in town, and I really enjoy him. And then my oldest daughter in South Dakota has a daughter who is a freshman in college this year. Yeah.
From a young man in a fairly rural area of Kentucky until now, tell us a little bit about the impact World War II had on your life and how that changed things, perhaps.
Well, for certain, serving in the Army had qualified me for the GI Bill, which, I mean, there's no way I could have gone to college without it. And and that going to college put me in contact with people who, you know, who had plans to do more than just hang around the bars in Winchester. And so, yeah, I think the biggest impact on me and you learn about how people from all over the country, different sections of the country, how they act, how they behave, what you learn quite a bit about people just from being in the service. I think that's one of the biggest impacts.
We've got a few minutes on the tape. Would you like to preach to your grandkids just a little bit? Well, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell my grandkids that you know, probably the biggest asset that they have is their personal character. Their, you know, who they are as a person. You know, it's important that people get an education. It's important that you know how to do things that are worthwhile. But I don't think anybody ever really succeeds as a person unless you develop this basic character of people being able to trust you, being honest about, you know, how you feel and what you want to do, and their character too of being interested in what happens to other people, you know, going out to other people. I guess that would be my.
We'd like to thank you for doing this morning, and thank you for all the things that you've done. Yeah. You've spent a lot of time in several different places and done some great things for us.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. And